I'm now joined by Johan Hari, who's really one of the best writers in the UK, talking about this subject of ours, climate change, and he's going to tell us some even more bad news.
Okay, well, let's imagine, we all know we need a 40% cut on carbon emissions on 1990 levels.
Only to get a coin flip, though.
To be even with a chance of a 50-50 chance of catastrophic climate change.
Great, would it?
It's not great at all, but it's the best that we're even talking about. So we've already made a massive compromise with human safety. But let's imagine all this fruit represents the 40% cut, right? No one's offering it, so you can chuck all that on the floor, right? No one's offering 40%.
I don't think we should chuck it.
Best offer we've got.
I think handing it to somebody.
Okay, well, hand it nicely. This will go into a delicious salad. Let's imagine the 30%, very best case scenario, we might offer 30%, sounds like. Unfortunately, the whole deal is so riddled with loopholes that even that is mythical.
Okay.
So we start with, firstly, when you hear people offering 30%, what most people assume is that they will domestically cut their emissions by 30%.
Like the UK?
Yeah.
Yep.
Say, for example, you think that we'll shut down a runway, we'll shut down a coal power station, we'll build a lot more wind farms. Completely untrue.
More jumpers.
Most of it is paid for by paying for other countries abroad to cut their emissions from rising how they would have. Now, that sounds reasonable at first. You think, well, the atmosphere doesn't know where it's come from. Unfortunately, a study by Stanford University found that more than half of all the carbon offsetting paid for by companies either doesn't exist, doesn't work, or would have happened anyway. So
and does that include, by the way, the jolly ones when people go flying and they...
Yeah, all rubbish. So
half of them don't exist or don't work.
They don't work, or they would have happened anyway. So, for example, Britain pays for hydroelectric dams in China. Unfortunately, those hydroelectric dams were almost entirely already built. They would have happened whether we came in and paid them or not.
A little porky pie, isn't
but
it?
in return for that, we keep open Kings North. So it's an absolute scam, right?
Wow.
Okay, now we then get to the slightly more techie...
We haven't got many emissions cuts left.
Exactly, and we get to the more techie and difficult cuts, but it's worth bearing in mind. You know, I've reported from places like Bangladesh and Darfur and Arctic where these loopholes will mean whether people live or die. So it's worth people staying with this.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one
even
that's
though
called...
we're using fruit for this.
Even though we're using fruit, the fruit of death.
Yes.
Okay, so imagine the first one is known as hot air. Okay, the targets that each country were allocated in 1990 before the fall of the Soviet Union. They're based on current emissions. So the Soviet Union was given a pretty big wad. Imagine it's that apple and that apple, right? The Soviet Union then collapsed. All its emissions fell through the floor, and in Eastern European former Soviet countries. So that stuff was never going to be emitted anyway, right? But they retained it in all the negotiations. They retain it today. Now they're allowed to sell it as a cut offset to rich countries. So you've got a farcical situation, and this isn't a small amount. We're talking about 10 gigatons of hot air. To give you a sense of perspective, if all the developed countries cut their emissions by 40%, that's only 6 gigatons. This is a massive amount.
Russia's hot air is just that?
Yeah, Russia and the former Soviet countries. Yeah, so let's take out that and that.
Oh, shit.
That's what we're left with, right?
That was serious.
Okay, we then get to the fact that the deals aren't even as good as they sound. We take out, first of all, a lot of the counting. Rich countries have forests, obviously places like Canada and New Zealand. They get credit, quite rightly, for keeping those forests intact, because if they cut them down, they get a load of carbon.
Which is what the other guy was on about.
Yeah, but there's a loophole. The loophole is, in the name of sustainable forestry management, you can cut down, not defined, you can cut down almost your entire forest and it doesn't contribute towards your emissions. So...
Hang on a minute, you can't cut down your forest, that's the whole point.
Yeah, but under the name of sustainable forest management, you can cut down an indefinite number of trees.
So you're like, I'm just doing a bit of tweaking.
Yeah, you can say I'm sustaining the trees by getting rid of them.
Cut them all down.
So let's take out the tangerine. That's what you've got.
That was Canada's forest.
Yeah, that's all the fake forests.
Fake forests.
Gone. Okay, then you look at the American deal. Now, this is a very clever piece of spin and trickery. The cuts we need are on 1990 levels. Everything is calculated according to that. The Americans are offering a pitiful 4% on 1990 levels, even in the best case scenario, even if you include all the loopholes.
Which is so suicide-packed.
Exactly. But, trouble is, they're not... obviously that sounds terrible, it's less than a tenth of the cuts that we need. So they've started saying, well, we'll cut on our 2005 level. So it sounds pretty impressive. You say, well, we're offering a big 17% cut on our 2005 levels. Sounds impressive. So there's fake accounting, so you've got to then take out the fake accounting.
So let me just go over that again. So America, when they say we're going to cut 17%, it's because they're using the wrong baseline year.
Exactly.
And it's actually 5%.
Exactly, less than 5%,
less than
4%.
Another porcupine.
Exactly.
Okay.
So once you factor in all this, you're left with a pretty, remember the huge pile of...
Just a tangerine and two bananas.
A farcical situation where the United States, under the current proposals, would not have to cut a single domestic emission until 2026. Okay, that's the cuts that are being offered. It's extraordinary.
So wait, if we get the deal as it is now,
if we get
America
the deal the
would
American
be able to
negotiators
they
are arguing for, they would be able to retain the current level where they are by far the highest emitters of warming gases until 2026. Not a single exhaust pipe.
Not a single low energy light bulb.
So you remember the big pile we needed? That's what's on offer at the moment. And that's why so many people are going to be protesting on the streets tomorrow, because what we're being offered here is an insult and an outrage and a terrible gamble with the future of humanity.
And 2 bananas and a tangerine.
Delicious though they are.
Thank you. Thank you very much for explaining that very, very well. Here you go, Han. So, that's the bad news from here inside COP, that we're going to be reduced to the best deal we could possibly hope for is a very small fruit pile. So Dan, our man on the streets, has gone out to see what else is happening in Copenhagen, because there's all sorts of people talking about all sorts of other systems we could have, which don't involve the current political system at all.
Here in Copenhagen, the campaigners aren't just protesting against the workings of the COP, there's also a positive agenda as well to try and find alternate solutions to the climate crisis. So today we're going to go and check out some of those meetings taking place around the city, and the first one is Klimaforum. Translation booth, because this entire conference is being translated into a multitude of different languages, and people over there are just meeting one another for the first time, and it's unbelievable how many different countries are represented here. So here we are inside one of the workshops, and behind me they're talking about the transition town movement under the title Sustainable Living, Localism and Resilience. In essence, what you've got here is people coming together and working out how they can fight the climate crisis in their own communities from the bottom up. What you have here is, in essence, the polar opposite of what's going on inside the Bella Centre, where you have a few world leaders coming together to decide how to top-down manage this problem as opposed to bottom-up. We're joined by Christine from Denmark, and she's one of the organisers of the Klimaforum here. First question is, how important do you think forums like this are, as opposed to the negotiations going on in the Bella Centre?
I think this is even more important, because it's you and me who's going to, do the changes in our lives to get this problem solved. So we need civil society, we need to get our butt out of the sofa and start working, and this is what we're trying to do here.
And is it working?
It's working. We have 100 organizations behind Klimaforum, and before we started we had 7,000 registered participants, but we stopped registering because it's an open forum, everybody can just walk in from the street. But we think we had about 30,000 people here, and we just made a declaration which was an open dialogue between 70 different organizations, and was decided here on Klimaforum. And we just, in 3 days, 300 organizations has signed our declaration. So we think it's going really well. But also, we are right now in negotiations with the G77, with the island states, trying to get them to endorse the declaration and, of course, use it to in their case in the Bella Centre.
And the most inspiring thing you've seen all week?
Jesus, it was the waste pickers organized. A small workshop held by waste pickers from Bogota and Mumbai, telling us how we can make a recycling system using the resources of homeless people and actually solve the trash problems of the world. That was so inspiring.
I can't tell you how different the feeling is in the Klimaforum as opposed to the Bella Centre. The Bella Centre is just incredibly stuffy, it's really closed off from the rest of the world, and you barely know that you were at the so-called most important meeting in humankind's history. So, in leaving today, I suppose the thought that I've got is, what does an alternative look like? If these negotiations fail, as it's looking increasingly likely that they will, who should come up with the solutions? How should they be organised, and who should be in charge of them? The loud and clear message coming from this place is it should be people coming together in communities.
Dan, I know you're not a professional, unlike everybody else involved in this team, but I have to say that you've been out on the streets of Copenhagen to do a piece about alternative political systems, and you haven't included Christian.